game I'm showing you today is Kerbal Space Program. It's a simulation game that's in an alpha stage. It's supposed to be released sometime this year, maybe next. Although it's in a very refined state, it's not very buggy, plays very well. I've only had it crash once or twice. It's a really enjoyable thing. It's a big difference from the usual things you get. So what I'm getting right here is building a spaceship. When I started the video, I already had a payload finished, which was a hub with that little station with a window. It's a hitchhiker's capsule where you can put forward the astronauts, which are called kerbals. So what I'm doing is just showing some of the building. The point of this ship that I'm making is I'm calling it a mothership with 6, or I should say 8 dropship capsules. So the point is I've got a space station in orbit, and I want to take this up there and have this meet up with it so I can bring astronauts to the space station, and when I want to, send one of them down at a time with these little drop ships. So this isn't made to be an instructional video or anything. This was a project I did. It actually went very, very poorly, but this is just an idea that you might want to replicate, and just mainly this is a let's play video type of thing. I'll just throw in some explanations, maybe a little narration here or there. It's actually rather long. The whole mission probably took me 4 hours, maybe 5. I cut it down to about 40 minutes in 2 sections. So if you've never played the game before, you build your spaceship in the vehicle assembly building. You can also build airplanes that take off horizontally. I'm here playing in career mode, which factors in money and also science, which you have to research and gather in order to unlock new parts. I've probably unlocked about 90% of the parts in this gameplay mode right here. So what you'll see me doing is I put those command modules on top of the liquid fuel tanks, and I just placed very small liquid fuel engines, and now I'm grouping the liquid fuel engines with the decouplers so I can eject each pod at once in the staging. So there's a lot of customization here. You can do a lot of things. There's a lot of freedom. Part of it's very sandboxy. You can do whatever you want, and it's really a good time. And I learned a lot about orbital mechanics. I'm an engineer by trade, although you don't need to, I didn't know anything about orbital mechanics starting this. I learned a lot, and you don't necessarily need to know how to run the numbers and anything like that. If you want to, you can, or you can use a calculator, or you can just play more casually and just, kind of ham-fistedly trudge through it, which is what I did when I first started. Then I started reading a lot of articles and, reading wiki and stuff like that, but that's not necessarily necessary. But if you like simulations or like something different, I really had a lot of fun with this game. I've been hooked on it for a couple of months now. So what I'm doing here is to put some outer liquid fuel tanks, because I'm going to go put boosters on this. This will be, depending on which iteration I'm on, the second or the third stage of my rocket. So I'm going to mount some things radially so that I can decouple them easier. The other part of this mission originally was going to just build the mothership dropship combo, and I decided to also take up that hitchhiker capsule and that hub, which will go into my space station. You'll see why later that this was a terrible idea, or at least I had a terrible design. I came home and did this after working, a long day, and I was kind of antsy and didn't think things through completely. So eventually I did get the hub on, I did get the hitchhiker capsules on, although the design I used had some flaws. I didn't put enough solar panels or batteries on it, and I also didn't put enough re-entry control thrusters. And so this rocket's probably on the medium to large size when I'm done with it. You can see here where I'm grouping the staging so that it will eject that part, the bottom part of the rocket, and ignite the thrusters. And here I'm going to go ahead and build the first and second stages. So in the game they give you the option of doing liquid and solid state boosters in addition to monopropellant fuel. If you know anything about solid state boosters, they are, you turn them on once and they burn until they're empty. So typically they have a very high thruster weight. They can make your craft very unwieldy and, just completely go out of control. And there's also some other things. Part of the fun of this game is just to build a design and see if it works, and then kind of refine it several times. Sometimes I'll just start from scratch, or sometimes I'll have some notes on the page, and I'll try to build it, but there's always refinements that come in later. I just recently, after playing it for, a couple of months, started to get into the real nitty-gritty of getting into engine efficiencies and things like that. But most of the time you don't really need to do that. So what I'm doing right here is there's radial decouplers that space these a little bit away from the hull, so you can eject them more easily and get the thrust over a wider footprint, making the craft more stable. Then there's some struts. People call them space tape, jokingly. Pretty much just little beams that you use to make your craft more rigid. And if you haven't played this game and you're familiar with, aerospace engineering or orbital mechanics or things like that, you can do engine gimbaling, you can change positions, you can do all sorts of, different things. You could build as many or as little stages as you want. Some people do SSTO, horizontal planes. I haven't messed with any of the planes at all yet. I've just been doing the rockets. And you can go straight on a mission to, the moon. The Earth in this game is called Kerbin, and there's the moon and Minimus, which is obviously a fictional moon around the Earth. And there's, I think 8 or 9 planets with varying numbers of moons you can go to. You can orbit around the sun, you can go wherever you want, all sorts of things. So what I'm messing around with right here is I'm putting a probe on the hitchhiker capsule, because if you don't have some sort of man or unmanned guidance, the part will become space debris. So I just wanted to have that on there. It's not really necessary. Ultimately, I realized it was a waste of time and money. But I wanted to be able to control that part in the event that I don't have any crew in there. Although since it has no rockets or boosters or anything, it's kind of pointless. So now I'm trying to do some of the more final touches. I'm trying to add RCS, which I don't remember exactly. I think it's re-entry control system. But it's small thrusters used to maneuver your rocket when you're docking or landing somewhere. For the purposes of this, it's going to be some docking with the space station. Without the RCS fuel, it's pretty much impossible. And what you'll see later is if you don't have enough RCS thrusters on each section, you will be completely out of control. So those are the RCS thrusters right there. And the one thing is, if you do start doing this, make sure you use 4 or 8 of them, because otherwise it'll be off balanced and pretty much useless. And you got to try to place them in the exact same plane. One of the other ideas I'll mention that you'll see later, I don't show it in the instruction because I tried to cut out some of the more boring parts, is I wanted to add parachute modules that I could put on the space station, and then if a craft needed to land on Earth or another planet or whatever, I could have them go and grab one and land. That way they weren't carrying the mass of the parachutes to the interplanetary voyages, which you'll see in the takeoff video soon that really unbalanced the craft and was a mess. But it's kind of funny. Part of the fun of this game is to watch things spectacularly fail. So there's the parachute modules I was talking about, and now I'm going to go ahead and launch the craft and do a little bit of testing. So you can immediately see this thing's horribly unstable. It's leaning one way, it's not structurally sound, just all in all, just not a very good design. But that doesn't going to stop me from doing some tests and making sure everything works. So you can see on the left side of the nav ball, which is your navigation system, you have your throttle. You also have a force meter to tell you how horrible things are going and if something might snap off. So I'm trying the engines, trying each of those pods to make sure they eject properly. So in space, it works, and then mesh with some parachute. Everything worked properly. Obviously the design was no good, but you can, see that the staging was set up. And then you can go back to the vehicle assembly building. So I came back and moved the parachutes around. Didn't show that just for the sake of time. This is also supposed to be an unmanned craft, and if you're not careful and you have seeds, the computer will keep putting pilots in. So I'm just checking here to make sure the docking decouplers work, which makes a nice little explosion when those fuel tanks hit the ground. Then I'm trying to check my other decouplers, so you can see that the parachutes work, sort of. So I got my pilot out of the way, going into the test flight. You can kind of see by how it's skewing. It's not me trying to control it. Just obviously not working. And I think this is about where I ditched the parachutes. Alright, so we've got a parachuteless craft, which is... So I flipped the map real quick to show you. I'm trying to get to that yellow line, because that's the space station's orbit. So you want to launch when you're going in both the correct direction and roughly underneath it, so I can meet up without having to do an additional burn in orbit. So on the lower left you can see the maneuvering tools. In the upper right you can see the gauges for fuel, electricity. Like I said, there's solid, liquid. The liquid has oxidizer and liquid fuel, and there's the onboard power. And on the left side you can see the staging, how much fuel is left in each engine. So you can see the solid stages are burning out pretty quick, and my liquid engine's going to overheat if I'm not careful. The top, although the Bandicam logo kind of covers it off, there's an altimeter, and below that is an atmosphere gauge, so you can see the different colors. The light blue is really thick, the part you want to get out of right away. Then after that, you try to can a little bit to, 60, 45 degrees, whatever you want to do, to get through that atmosphere with gravity, while keeping gravity's effects from hitting you too much. So you go in a angled orbit, and if you have enough fuel, it's a lot more efficient. So the hardest part is getting out of the light blue. It's about 12 or 13,000 meter lowest level of the atmosphere. You'll see here, I'm about to kick off the solid state boosters because they're about to be expended. That's what those decouplers are showing, or separators rather. As you can see there, I forgot to build little I-beams or struts, so it just destroyed my whole rocket. So that's one of those iterations. If I would have been more careful during design, I would have put those in there. I usually put a couple little cubic struts in, which you can see there now, and I'm also putting separators in and knock them away in the right direction. But again, if you're in a hurry, you're not paying attention, you'll forget some of this stuff. In addition to the career mode, there's complete sandbox modes in this game where you can play with no money, build enormous, ridiculous rockets. I like kind of the challenge and some realism to it. So I'm not trying to build this 12-engine rocket that costs millions of dollars in the game. I think this, yes, you can see in the lower left, this rocket costs about 115, 120,000, which isn't bad. I think when I'm done, it's probably about 130. So these little tiny solid-state boosters will fire when I decouple these engines, and the goal is, once I get them set up properly, it blows them away from the ship so that they don't destroy it. So again, I'm pulling the crew out since it keeps putting someone in there, lining up my launch window so I'm right underneath the the space station. Full thrust, go. Seem like there's a lot going on, it might seem a little dull. When you're actually launching, you're paying attention to a lot of information from your speeds, the direction your ship is heading, what part of the atmosphere you're in. You might jump out and see where you are in orbit. So there's a lot going on, although watching a YouTube video doesn't really convey it. It's a really interesting game, and especially if you're like me, you like to do not necessarily simulators, but games where you build things, design things like that. It's really interesting. I just have a lot of fun with it. The game very refined. And, you know, I've played a lot of games that were buggier, worse, and just generally less fun, less deep than this for way more money. Alright, so you can see I kicked off the solid state boosters. I'm now in that middle section of the atmosphere, starting to burn through a lot more of my fuel. I believe this is one of the designs where I didn't have enough fuel or correct staging, so I'm going to run out and get stranded. So you can see that payload on the front with the hub and all those connectors and everything like that on top of the hitchhiker capsule. It's pretty heavy, so I just didn't have enough thrust or enough fuel to go with that thrust to get the thing where it needed to be. So in the upper right you can see my fuel starting to burn down pretty quick, and then by the staging 10 you can see the liquid fuel for that specific engine along with its heat. If you pay close attention you see it by the nav ball, I'm playing with the throttle constantly to try and, you know, only get it a little bit hot but not blow the thing up, because it will destroy your ship if you overheat it. One of the other things that I originally didn't remember to put on was those little wings you see at the bottom, which are stabilizer fins, which I often overlook, and then my ship veers out of control and I have to add them back and launch again. The nice thing is, even in career mode, if you launch and you just revert to the assembly, it doesn't take your money again. So if you screw up a design, you can fix it relatively easily. You only lose your money if you start quick saving and quick loading, or leave the game and come back. So it's relatively forgiving. It's to the point where it's fun and not frustrating. But it's also not too easy. Alright, so now I'm going to kick off my first stage and go to the other one. This is where the trouble starts to begin. I've only got 3 of the smaller engines. That's not enough to provide adequate thrust to get me into orbits. So you can see right there I have a parabola-like trajectory, but it's pretty shallow. I don't have a high enough peak. This is just all bad news. Nothing can see it because of the stupid Bandicam logo, but I'm slowly getting less and less altitude as I burn. It's just pretty much bad news all around. Where I'm realizing that I'm just not gaining much speed and everything's starting to go wrong. And if you see at the orbit meters per second right in the middle, it's slowly decreasing, and that's the opposite you want to do. And ideally you want to be at like 1500 or 2000 meters per second to get a good trajectory, which I'm obviously not. So you can see right there that parabola, I need to stretch it out so it's a circular orbit, and it's just not going. And I'm almost at the peak of my parabola where it's most efficient to burn. I was never going to get there. Alright, so what I did was I reconfigured the rocket, cut that all out, cut out the launch so you weren't too bored. You can see here I'm in the 3rd tier of the atmosphere, which is almost in space. I added some more larger boosters to try and get this thing going. And now I'm going into a 2nd stage. So this worked a heck of a lot better. Put more fuel, more weight. Cost a little bit more, but it got the thing in a better trajectory. So I'm starting to pick up some speed here. You can see that parabola again. I'm trying to get that peak at the periapsis. So my station is I think at 130 meters, 130,000 meters. So I'm trying to get that roughly there and then just circularize my orbit. And again, it's most efficient to burn the peak. So right here, I did some bad things with my design. I didn't route the fuel properly and realized I didn't have enough thrust, so I'm keeping my 2nd stage longer than I intended to. So I'm moving fuel between tanks, which you can do with the Alt key if you're familiar with the game. Normally, you wouldn't pull fuel from your delivery stage to lower ones, but I realized I wasn't going to have enough speed, so I had to kind of deviate, because those little engines up top just weren't doing it. Starting to get my speed over that 1,000 meters per second towards the magical 1,500 to 2,000. You get a lot more speed and momentum, etc., to get you to a better orbit. So you can see it's starting to circularize a little bit while I'm still raising that peak as well. So you can see I'm on my last second stage fuel time right here. You can see right on the left side, that bottom engine is starting to run out of fuel. So it's starting to elongate a bit, the peak's starting to get a little bit higher. All in all, it's starting to get a bit better. So now I've burned out that lower stage. Now I guess I decided to fuel it up a little bit more because I didn't have enough thrust. You can see my orbital velocity is also getting to a reasonable level again. And now I'm done with the second stage. So now that the craft has less mass, it's easier to get it further, although I have less thrust from that middle stage engine. So you can see my peak is getting to be where I want it. Right there I'm messing with a maneuver node, so you essentially make calculations and adjustments, and then it'll tell you where to burn on your nav ball. So I got the peak set right, and I'm just adjusting the direction, and you'll see on the nav ball there's a blue node that'll show me exactly where to fly. And for reference, that node that you see currently that's yellow is your prograde, which is what you burn to circularize your orbit or extend your orbit. And then there's another one that's another yellow icon with like kind of a crosshatch pattern. That's the one you go to, which is retrograde, which is what you burn to decrease your orbit size. So that blue one tells me where to burn. You can see my node time and how long I need to burn by the nav ball to the right. So I get close and then I start burning. And I realized here I was way lower in fuel than I thought I was going to be, where I needed to be. I thought I might run out of fuel. Kind of address that a little bit later. So you can see that green bar going down, showing I need less meters per second, which is delta V, which is once it gets to zero, closer to zero, cut and throttle back. So now you can see that I've circularized my orbit, it's sustained, and everything's good to go. So if you want to see more, stay tuned for part 2.